Hey, and welcome back to Tending Lambs. Today's video is the first in a three-part series, Ways We Undercut Our Children's Emotional Resilience and How Not to. Today's focus is an intro into what emotional resilience is and why it's important. I find it particularly important because it's applicable not only to raising littles, but also to raising older children and teenagers, how we handle relationships with other adults, and how we handle our own emotions. I hope that by now, if you've been watching my videos for a little while and digging more into gentle parenting, that you've come to realize that gentle parenting is not just about how we handle our little ones, but also how we handle ourselves, and that it's impossible to do this without reevaluating the way we were raised and the way we interact with other people. There's a quote that I really like, and I'm not sure who said it, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, so if you know, please let me know in the comments, but it goes something like, parenting is difficult not only because we have to deal with our kids, but because we have to deal with ourselves. And that is, so far in my experience, has been really true. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, we go through our days really not examining ourselves. The habit is to leave ourselves unevaluated and our bad behavior excused, while we try to really strongly control the behaviors of others, including our children. Of course, nobody likes the process of having to face our bad behavior and the fears that cause it, or the anger that causes it, or what have you. It's an uncomfortable process for anyone. But what makes the difference between someone who is able, for the most part, to face their issues head on, and to address them, and to try and change them, and someone who is not? In large part, it's emotional resilience. So what exactly is emotional resilience? Let me read you this quote I found online. It summarizes it really well. Emotional resilience refers to one's ability to adapt to stressful situations or crises. More resilient people are able to roll with the punches and adapt to adversity without lasting difficulties. Less resilient people have a harder time with stress and life changes, both major and minor. What a lack of emotional resilience does is make someone prone to avoidance of change, avoidance of issues, and avoidance of oftentimes everyday life, from chores all the way to major red flags in relationships. Some of the more obvious signs of a lack of emotional resilience are becoming easily overwhelmed by everyday normal life, extreme anxiety, depression, a lack of lasting intimate relationships, bullying and biting sarcasm all the time, a level of defensiveness that causes constant bickering and frustrations with other people, and also, even more seriously, self-destructive, emotionally pacifying behaviors such as drug or alcohol abuse, and even abuse of food. Maybe you find yourself feeling a little bit defensive about this list of behaviors. I kind of did myself as I was making the list. I kind of was coming up with reasons why certain ones of these applied to myself. Yeah, well, I do that because I am like that because, and that is actually the entire point. We have things that have caused in our past a lack of emotional resilience, which makes these things more prevalent. Traumas and huge life changes like loss or a move to a different country or state without the support of those around you can create a deficit, so to speak, in your emotional resilience and make it more difficult in the future to cope with changes, small and large. So if you're finding in yourself this urge to say, well, I have this trauma and that has caused me to respond in these ways, I hear that and I understand it. And I'm telling you that that's really normal, and that happens to a lot of people, actually. And your lack of emotional resilience often will come from the traumas that you are thinking of in your mind, or maybe not even traumas, but the problems that you had facing as you were growing up. And that is exactly why it's so important for us to learn how to cope with our own issues and hopefully raise our children with less, so that there are less of these issues holding them back from flourishing. No, having a good relationship with your parents and with the people around you won't solve all of your kids' problems. But as Christian parents, it is our responsibility to do our best to raise our children to be resilient and gracious people, because God has given them to us to communicate His grace and His gospel. And we want to do everything that we can to help that message get to their hearts. So, on to some facts that help put this into perspective. On one end of the spectrum, we have people who were subject to abuse or neglect as a child. Research shows that people with higher ACE scores are actually at higher risk for things like a heart attack and diabetes, let alone emotional problems. If you're not sure what an ACE score is, ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. And we don't have the time to get into all of that right now, but I will include some links to find out more information. You can find out your score to learn how many adverse childhood experiences you had. And these are a conglomeration of experiences that have been shown to have an extreme effect on how we deal with life for the rest of our lives. Now, this may all sound really extreme, and like I'm only talking about those people who have been subjected to situations that we would all look at, punitive and gentle parenters alike, and say, that's wrong, that's abuse. And while those situations are included in this assessment, that's not the only thing that I'm talking about. Unfortunately, it's a much wider issue than just the most blatant cases of abuse. For example, recent studies have shown that corporal punishment is associated with increased aggression and is likely to make children more defiant in the future. And according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, spanking alone is associated with similar outcomes of those children who experience abuse. And now that's not to say that someone who was spanked 2 or 3 times or not very regularly is going to have the same outcome as someone who was severely neglected or abused. But it impacts people in the same way, in the same manner. And that is a really important takeaway from this new research. But aside from corporal punishment, we do things to each other and to our children every day that can have a lasting impact on on their emotional resilience. Things like not allowing them to express their emotions, but also overindulgence and allowing their emotions to control us and the household around us. There are a lot of things that we do unconsciously because we were raised with them ourselves that can directly affect this. And it's really an important subject to be conscious of and to start making a conscious effort to be better about. This is something I think we all have a tendency to resist. We have a, oh, it's not so bad type of mentality, or a, oh, well, life is really hard, so they need to know that now. They need to learn that right now and not have any delusions about life being all happy and fair. Something I hear a lot is they'll survive. But the thing about that mentality is that, one, it actually helps kids to learn coping mechanisms before they get out into the world full of responsibility and disappointments and difficulties. So saying they need to learn it now as if being very harsh with them is going to help them later in life, it's just not the case. And number two, that's a really low bar we're setting. They'll survive. That's an incredibly low standard for our children. I want my children to do way more than survive the difficulties. I want them to learn how to cope well. And I want them to have solid relationships with people that can help them through their issues. I want them to know that when they turn to Jesus, that he is there with wisdom and love and grace, and that they don't have to avoid him. They don't have to avoid other people. They don't have to avoid their issues out of fear of damnation or out of fear of failure and fear of these things that they've learned they can't cope with. So they have avoided it for so long. So finally, what emotional resilience is not, and this is good for you and for me and for our kids to know, it's not pushing through the difficult part and pretending like you're okay. Emotional resilience is not maintaining friendships from a distance, but as soon as difficulty comes up or a subject that you don't want to talk about comes up, you shut it down and move the other way. What emotional resilience is not walking through life pretending like everything's okay and you got this when you really don't. And inside you're hurting very badly and you can't maintain relationships without constant fighting, and you can't maintain your household without feeling like you're going to break down. These things are not emotional resilience, and it is bad. It's not okay. We don't have to live like this, but we have to recognize the dysfunctionality in it first before we can get better. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that this was enlightening for you. And I also hope that you will stick around for the next two in this series, where I go a little bit more in depth into how we unconsciously, or the ways in which we unconsciously can cut our children off at the knees and ourselves in relationships, and ways to not do that, ways to cope with our issues, and ways to help our kids cope with the big upsets and disappointments and changes in life. If you'd like to be part of the conversation further, because there's always more to say, please join our Facebook group, Tending Lambs Community Group. You can also find us at facebook.com/tendinglambs, instagram.com/tendinglambs, and also at our new website, tendinglambs.com, where there are a lot of other gentle parenting resources and also our new blog. We would love to have you as a reader. So, until next time.